Thank you for having me today. It's the first time I think ever when I've spoken and someone called me a personality. I think I've been called a character before, but never a personality, so thank you so much for that. I feel right at home. Mane Mysore, as Dr. Urs pointed out. And so I come to you with a confession and three major kinds of ideas. My confession is I have never been a business educator properly. I teach leaders for a living, and so certainly that's related to leadership. I've never been an academic, and I'm only an Indian in training, so I don't necessarily claim to have all the nuances about how to do business education in India, but I hope to leave you with three broad sets of ideas today that perhaps may be a little unusual and perhaps helpful to groups like the Mysore Royal Academy and others who want to take education in this country to the next level. The first is going to be around culture, the second around policy, and the third, where I'm going to spend most of my time, is really more or less around teaching, curricula, and better ways and unique ways to do that. So the first is really one of the things that attracted me to come to India in the first place. I think it's such an exciting time to be here. And yes, there are challenges in India. There are infrastructure challenges. There are challenges in the level of business proficiency at the global level. Although I'm fortunate to be buffered from a lot of that when I work at Infosys, because I get to work with some really, really great people in this country, including but not limited to Mysore's Murthy. And so I think the fact that one of the cultural values that's so compelling for my wife and I to move here was the fact that education is really revered here. Not unlike when I've worked in China or in other countries around Asia, where I think those people who are educated are something like rock stars would be in my country. And so there's no shortage of demand by great Indians for education, and yet, as we saw in Professor Sinha's presentation, there's a huge shortage of opportunities for Indians to learn. And that was a good thing for me personally back in the 90s, because I met my wife when she came to the US to study, and I'm the reason she's back in Mysore. But we need to have many crores more worth of capacity to teach people. Murthy says that although he's extremely proud at a very microeconomic level of what he's achieved, at a macroeconomic level for India, he thinks that India needs 5,000 more Infosys. And he claims he's a heretic in his own country because he's quite passionate about the young people and the future that they have. In fact, he likes to point out that perhaps this is the best time in 400 years, since December 31st, 1600, for the Indian business person. Because since 91, there continues to be increased liberalization. So one of the aspects that I want to talk about is freedom. The economic freedom and even educational freedom that appears to be ever increasing in India, whether it's deregulating government interference in the way teachers teach in this country at all levels, including but not limited in business, or Delhi's proposal to liberalize business schools to set up shop here. And I know there are a number from other countries looking to India as a future to teach. And so the environment is really perfect for this kind of work. The fact that if you look at the global demographics, the rest of the world is pretty much aging, and in 25, 30 years, when India has the largest density of people on the planet, it'll also have one of the youngest workforces. So it seems like it's the perfect storm in a positive way for this kind of work. And one of the things I liked about Professor Sinha's presentation was this idea of radically different ways of thinking about business education, and particularly with respect to quality. And that particularly attracts me because I used to be responsible for Six Sigma globally for Motorola. And so I think about learning in this interdisciplinary sort of way, and perhaps in a way that's a bit strange or unusual, but I hope that's the source for some innovative ideas that may pan out. And so when it comes to curricula, I would like to propose that the path forward for business education here is an outcome-centric approach. What is it that the business person needs to be able to do by the end of their degree, and working backwards from there to saying, what are the experiences we need to give those people to be able to do those things consistently well when they go launch their first venture, when they go take their first business job. I think, at least in the United States where I was educated, too often it was pretty provider-centric. The professor felt like teaching X, Y, Z, so therefore we learned it. Or a certain kind of faculty needed to have jobs, so we taught certain classes and made those breadth requirements for our students. So I think the opportunity to start thinking afresh is second to none in India. What does it mean to be an excellent business person? Professor Sinha gave us a number of ideas around sustainability. At the Eastern Academy of Management Conference in Bangalore about a week and a half ago, that was a pretty hot topic among global academics. But it needs to be operationalized into, well, what do you teach the business leader? How do they serve their customers? How do they create margins and respect all the stakeholders in a holistic sort of way? And with that criterion-centric, that outcome-oriented approach, I think there's many creative alternatives that I would like to explore with you today. One is around the behaviors that I just mentioned, and the second is really around the things that drive the behaviors. Narayana is famous for role modeling a values-based approach to business. I think particularly that was prominent long before it was fashionable, before Satyam, before Bernie Madoff, before Enron, and it served the company well. I think it's given us a lot of trust with our customers, and I think those sorts of values are things that our business education, frankly, globally, I'm not sure that anyone's cracked the code on that with the kind of global unethical behaviors and bad decisions that have destroyed everything from Lehman Brothers, which is the world's biggest bankruptcy, to a former employer of mine, Lucent Technologies. But similarly, where does that innovation come from? How do we impart really creative ways for our business students to come up with the sort of extremely clever things that Professor Sinha showed us? And then what are the instructional methods by which we can consistently produce innovative, responsible, values-driven leaders? And so I want to leave you with a few ideas that are fairly unusual, in my opinion, to be taught in business schools, but we're doing at Infosys, and I think may have merit for you to consider. One is around objective assessments at the individual person level so that they can get feedback on where they are and what they need to grow. I don't mean in terms of just tests or classes, although that's certainly in scope. I mean on an ongoing basis, getting business leaders at the larval level ready to be lifelong learners, as the measurement itself. And so their score points to things they've already mastered, they shouldn't worry about, things that are beyond their reach, that are up at the Narayana level, and versus the things that are just matched to them. So that kind of personalization becomes highly possible with technology. And so there are many technology aspects, but I don't want to overemphasize the technology. So how many of you, can I see a show of hands, how many of you know who Mr. Khan is, who started Khan Academy? A few people. Wonderful. Well, I'm pleased to introduce this to you because I hope tonight when you go home and you log onto the internet, you check out, you Google Khan Academy. He is a gentleman who is a former investment banker who was inspired by the opportunity. He was teaching his cousins, and he found it difficult in his investment banking day job to do this in a one-on-one session, so he recorded it on YouTube. And he's a very well-studied, extremely articulate teacher, and it went so well with his relatives that they said, you know, we prefer actually to get it on YouTube than to talk to you. Not because they had anything against him, but because they could go back. And he's actually expanded. It's completely free on the internet, and it's everything from K through 12 to investment banking, economics, history, statistics. It's quite broad, and it's really struck many people's attention around the world, including Bill Gates at one of the technology education design conferences, as a potential paradigm shift for education. My boss, Chris Gopalakrishnan, one of the founders of Infosys, he's asked me to think about this for leader development, particularly as we try and transform our company toward basically being much more entrepreneurial and business problem-oriented versus our traditional technology roots. Much of the 50,000 employees we're going to hire in the next 12 months
will go through increasingly Khan Academy-like instruction where they do a lot of the didactic things on their own, and the classroom becomes much more applied. Like, how do I apply this to what I'm doing? So I think there are opportunities like that. For many years, I've been a proponent of what some people call blended learning, where there are these self-paced components, and then you either get people in a class or use synchronous technology to help people apply it, and so that there's a lot more spacing in between the learning and the doing over time. But in the end, I think none of it really matters unless these people can consistently deliver the business objectives in a responsible way, sustainably over time. And I think that's the sort of consequence that creates brand for an institute